Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I was doing a poll on my Instagram. If you haven't checked out my Instagram yet, you should definitely do that because I am asking you a lot of questions about my upcoming videos, what you would like to see. And I was doing that last week as well. And because I found a beautiful dress and then also a really nice jacket and then a blouse. And I was asking you guys what topic you'd like me to do on my next video. You guys voted like by far for the dress, but then I realized that it's, you know, freezing cold outside and it's literally like a doll dress. So there's no chance that I'm gonna do this dress at the moment because I won't be able to model it outside without catching a cold. We don't want that at the moment. So I figured the next best option is the blouse because that's also the second most voted for topic. And I realized that I have never done a blouse on my channel before, which is such an essential or like such a basic thing, I guess. So it's about time that we're gonna do some sort of basic blouse, and I'll tell you all about it and how to pattern it, how to sew it, and all of that good stuff. So let's go. So what we need for a blouse is some sort of base block. I am using my usual base block that I made in a video that you can go ahead and watch here. I also have this base block digitized in sizes XS to 3XL. So if you are interested in an already finished base block, you can go ahead and check out the link down in the description below to my Etsy store where you can purchase this base block. Keep in mind though, if you do so, you have to fit the base block before we use it. Not only if you buy the already made pattern, but also if you make it yourself. After my video that I linked up here, you have to do a mock-up and fit it to the person the base block is made for, which I have already done, so this fits me very nicely. This is, by the way, a base block with an addition of 2 centimeters, which is, you know, like a good start, a good base thing for upper garments. And I also have the sleeve, which I usually don't use for my patterns because I don't know why, there's just a lot of sleeveless stuff that I do. But for a blouse, obviously, the sleeve is very, very important. And there are a few things that we're gonna do with the sleeve as well, which I'm super excited about to show you. But to start off, we're just gonna trace out our base block to change it up. I'm not tracing out the darts because I want to make it sort of like a tunica. So it's gonna be wide for the waist. So I'm just gonna leave this out. I'm gonna draw in the waistline though, because that's important, and of course the bust point. Do not skip the bust dart for now, because you know, it's shaping the shoulders. It's rather important, so just keep that in, and we're gonna deal with it in just a second. So you can see that I left quite a lot of room in here. That's because I want to make a A-line for my blouse. And we have the shoulder dart still in our the shoulder dart, that's what it's called, still in our pattern, and I don't want to have like a line right here. So what I'll be doing is, because I want to have this as an A-line blouse basically, I am just gonna cut towards the dart right here in a parallel line to the center front and close the shoulder dart and open a big dart down here, because that's the plan anyways, as I want to have an A-line. So what I like to do for that is just leave a tiny bit of paper still attached and cut into the other, like cut down here and here, so that I can basically just turn it and overlap it so that both dart legs are joined and lay on top of each other. And then I can just, you know, tape it down, and I have this big dart that I can work with. Now, I think I want to make it up until the hip line, so up until here. And we're gonna do the hem line after we're done with the pattern. So what I want to do here is, first of all, put paper underneath this gigantic dart. So now that this is closed off, we can actually go ahead and just draw a straight line. down here. We'll make it a bit wider here at the hip. Let's just make it 4 centimeters wider because I really want to have volume. And now we can basically go ahead and just finish the hemline. Just do a parallel 10 centimeter line to the hip line, and then we're just gonna curve this. Something like that. If you already purchased my coat guide, my jacket and coat guide, you saw that there are specific blouse colors in there and tutorials on how to do blouse colors, which is handy now because you're obviously gonna construct one. So I'd suggest dearly to go get my guide for jackets and coats. It's not only for coats, but like most techniques are used while sewing coats and jackets, but there are also a few tips and tricks that you can use for other garments, such as the collar. And we are actually gonna make obviously a collar for this blouse. Yeah, so let's do that. So to prepare the collar, we actually have to widen the neckline by 1 centimeter in the front. And coming from the shoulder in the back, also 1 centimeter, but ending in 0.5 centimeters. So we're just gonna do like this sort of line here. Now we want to measure the front and back new neckline, I guess. And we can go ahead and construct our final piece, I guess. We need a separate piece of paper for that. I'm just gonna try to fit it on here, not sure if I can. We're gonna start with a line. And we're gonna add up our front and back neck width, so that will be 21.8 centimeters. And we're just gonna measure that on that line right here and draw a rectangle. So let's do 3 centimeters, like that. And then we're gonna measure from this right here is our center back. We're gonna measure from that in this direction our back neck width, which in my case is 9.4. So this is our shoulder point basically. And from this point on, we're gonna have like some sort of curve. So we are going to measure 1.5 centimeters up, or it says 1 to 1.5. Let's do the same as in the example. Let's do 1.2 centimeters right here. And now we're gonna draw a curved line into the shoulder point, which is gonna be, you know, our final collar stand curve. And from this point on, we can measure in a 90-degree angle our collar stand height again up, and just draw a parallel curve up here that also leads into the original rectangle that we have. And now this right here is still our center front. We're gonna have some sort of overlap in our shirt. So basically what we have to do before we continue with our collar, we have to figure out how much our button tape is, how wide it's gonna be. And I don't want it to be too wide. Let's do 3 centimeters right here. And now we can draw like a nice curve or whatever shape. So basically what we're doing is the curve from your collar down to into your button tape, which does not need to be a curve. You can basically design it however you want. The curve is just the standard thing, I guess. And since we're doing like some sort of basic blouse, I'm just gonna draw this kind of curve. And that is already our collar stand. For the actual collar, we are going to draw a parallel line from our curved center point right here, parallel to the original rectangle, into the center back right there. Now we're gonna measure from the center back line the distance here, which was 1.2 centimeters, plus another 1.5 centimeters to create some sort of distance here. And on top here, we're gonna draw the color, which is like gonna angle down right here. So I am gonna measure up 2.7 centimeters from this point right here. And I can go ahead and draw like a small parallel line to the bottom line right here. And this is the lowest seam of our collar. Now we can go ahead and measure upwards our collar width, which I want a decent collar width. I think it's very modern to have like a big collar. So since I have my collar stand at 3 centimeters, I'm gonna do 5. I guess that would fold over nicely and then overlap still. So let's do 5 right here. And I can go ahead and also draw a kind of parallel line right here. And now you want to draw a curved line from this point into the center point right here, but make sure that this doesn't get any bigger. It just needs to get a tiny, like gradually smaller until you end in the point right here in your center front. And the same thing goes for your collar. You don't want your collar to get any smaller throughout this line right here. You just want it to get bigger. So what I'll do is first of all measure my line right here, my distance of my collar stand, because that needs to be the same as this right here. So I can also go ahead and draw like some sort of dart where the shoulder is. Let's just do it 9.4, just as my neckline is. So it's basically the same still. So let's add this notch right here as well, and then go down and measure the other distance, which was 11.7, so it's a tiny bit smaller. 11.7 is also right here in this corner right here, so that's good. And now I can decide what kind of angle I want here. I want this to be, you know, a nice color, so I'm gonna make the corner there a bit sharper and then just let it ease into the original line that I drew here. So that's your outer collar. For the final color itself, you also need an inner collar, and yeah, I'm gonna do that on my computer. So this basic collar right here is like all in my code guide, and also how to make a, you know, inner and outer collar piece, like at the facing of the collar, basically how to change your pattern up for that. All in my code guide, so you can go ahead and check that out if you're interested. What I'll be doing to fit this piece, because this is a huge amount of fabric for something that is basically not really changed up. So in my opinion, this will look fine. I'll go ahead and just fit my collar piece, because that's something new I constructed. I don't know if it fits well, if it lays well, if it looks good. So I'll just make this and maybe like the upper part of my blouse in a sample fabric and put it on my dress form to see how it looks. And then for the sleeves, I'm also not gonna do a lot of changes. I'm basically just gonna take out the dart and, you know, make also a A-line sleeve, I guess. Just make it more, have more volume in the cuff, and then just have folds and a slit. So it's not too big of a construction thing, I guess. So I'll be back with all of that done. So this is the mock-up. I ended up making a whole mock-up, or at least, you know, a one-sleeved one. Yeah, this is what the pattern looks like. It looks very elegant, but, you know, not too much, like very standard. It is an A-line, so you have to like that. I very much do. I think it looks really pretty. This is the sleeve right here. I have a slit. I will show you on my Instagram, actually, both versions of how you can make a slit like that. So go ahead and check that out. It's gonna be online already, I guess, if not next week. Yeah, so apart from that, I did, like, first of all, I didn't have my mock-up fabric anymore, which is why I had to use like this weird polyester fabric, which I absolutely hate working with it. Like, it did not iron well, it did not, you know, do the things that I want the fabric to do, and I just really did not like it. And then on top of that, I put too much addition for the outer collar into my collar pieces, which is why they're like like doing these weird wobbly things, which I'm gonna fix in the final pattern. But like the scale, I guess, of the color I think is really, really nice. I think I want to just leave the original pattern as is and just, you know, rework the facing of the color, or like the outer color, whatever, just to make it work better. Then also another thing, I added the button tape onto the front pieces, which I'm not a big fan of. I mean, it doesn't have, you basically don't have a, you know, parted seam, like you don't have the ditch of a seam here next to it, but you still have to top stitch in order to work with the button tape on the inside. So to me, it's just too much hassle for the same outcome. It's just easier if you have a separate button tape pattern piece, which I will be doing for the final pattern. I really like the length of the blouse, like really nice in my opinion. I like the width of my sleeve at the cuff area. I want to make the cuff a tiny bit wider because it's very small on me at the moment. And also I want to lower my armhole a tiny bit because this seems quite narrow. So these are the only things that I will be doing. Apart from that, I think the fit itself, I love how the shoulder sits. I did not change anything at all on my sleeve up here. So this is really nice if you look at this. I really like this. And yeah, this fabric right here is rather heavy, which is why everything like falls down. It's like this, you know, has like no stand to it. I will be using a lighter cotton fabric which has much more structure and it's not just gonna plop down like this. So this will be a bit more A-line, the final thing, and also the sleeve won't just fall down to the cuff, like it's gonna have a tiny bit of more puff, which I like. So that's what I'm gonna do. The only thing that I'm gonna add, which I haven't done, is actually add a fold here in the center. So I'm just gonna do like a fold of 5 centimeters or something, which means more volume down here, but also like a nice fold in the back, which I quite like. So that's the only thing that I'm gonna do. Yeah, really like it. I hated working with this fabric, but I got it done. So let's work on the pattern. So when starting to sew a blouse, I actually like to start with my sleeves in general, so in this case with my slit facings, because they're just bugging me most of the time, so I just want to get it out of the way. I'm ironing both of the longer sides of the outer slit facing inwards. To iron the small corner, I cut into the corner. On my pattern there is an indicated cutting line for you, so you don't have any trouble doing and preparing this at all. And then I fold all other edges inwards 1 centimeter as well, leaving only the lowest edge unironed, as that will be sewn into the cuffs. Last thing is to just fold it in on itself and give it a good iron as well. For the inner slit facing, I iron it in half first and then fold the longer edges inwards to meet at the folding line. I iron the upper edge down and then fold it in on itself as well, just like the outer facing. Once done with all of that, you are going to end up with 4 pieces in total, and it's really important to know where they're going to be placed, so watch closely to see which side goes where, because this is prone for mistakes, believe me. Lay down your fabric wrong sides up, really important, and pin the outer slit facing next to the slit with both edges of the fabric lining up. The length of the slit is also the length of your seam in a second. The inner slit facing goes on the other side of the slit. Stitch both facings down 1 centimeter right and left of the slit. This should be right at the fold line of the facing. Iron the seam allowance towards the slit from the right side, and now you can go ahead and fold the facing outwards already. Because you prepared all of the folds already beforehand, this should be really easy. Just make sure that also the upper corner is folded down, because this one just tends to be a bit, you know, stubborn sometimes. And then you can just pin down the inner slit facing as well to top stitch it down very closely to the fold. And the next step is going to be the outer facing, but let's do the inner one first. So you can see that I'm stitching right next, just towards the edge of the slit, and then I just turn my piece 90 degrees under my sewing machine with the needle in my piece, and just also stitch down the small upper corner. Not really any need for that because we're going to cover it anyways, but I just wanted to make sure. Next thing is the outer slit facing. I am also ironing the seam allowance to the slit itself, and then once I turn everything over, you can actually see that it covers the inner slit facing completely. Math. I'm kidding. That's just how the pattern itself works, and it's really, really nice. If it doesn't cover it perfectly because, you know, maybe you've done it for the first time and this is a tricky thing, you can like kind of wiggle it a bit and overlap it to an extent so that it doesn't fold on top of your slit facings. That's very important. Just try to make it neat and nice. If it doesn't look the greatest on the inside, that's totally fine, so don't worry about that. I also top stitch the outer slit facing very closely to the still open edge, and then also do this kind of X shape on the top, which covers the division of the inner and outer slit facing, and it's just, you know, keeping everything in place. You can actually do any design that you want, it doesn't really matter. I just went with the very conservative X. Next up are the folds that I just fix in place with my iron and then also with some pins. They always face towards the back side of the sleeve, so make sure to follow the arrows in the pattern for this. And you can go ahead and just fix them in place with some stitches as well. I think I'm doing that, but there's no need for that. You can also just leave the pins in place. Now you can go ahead and close the side seam, so just put right sides of your sleeve together and sew along the side seam. Also make sure to overlock your seam and iron your seam allowance towards the back of the sleeve. Next up are the cuffs. You want to prepare them by ironing them in half, wrong sides together, and then one side of the cuff you want to iron the seam allowance inwards. Now that that's prepared, I fold my cuffs wrong sides together to sew the smaller edge together. I start stitching at the fold that I just ironed in. It just makes everything easier later to iron and to work with. I do this on both sides, of course. Cut down the seam allowance to about 5 millimeters before turning everything right sides out. The non-iron side of the cuffs now gets pinned onto the wrong side of the sleeve, starting at the slit, going all the way around over the side seam and ending in the other side of the slit. Sew both pieces together and iron the seam allowance into the cuffs. Because the other edge is already prepared, I can now just fold the cuffs over the stitching line and pin it down to top stitch the cuff in place. And the sleeves are done. Let's continue with the button tape. So the button tape works kind of similar to the cuffs. You want to iron the button tape in half first, wrong sides together, and then iron one seam allowance of the two sides towards the inside. You want to do that on both button tapes, of course. Now, exactly like with the cuffs, pin the non-iron side of the button tape to the wrong side of the front piece and just sew at 1 centimeter, in my case, whatever your seam allowance is. Then you want to iron your seam allowance into the button tape, and then you can fold your button tape over and cover the stitching line with the already pre-ironed seam allowance to just cover it and then top stitch it. So it's basically like this technique that I use in so many different things, specifically here now in the button tape and the cuffs. This is something that you can keep in mind and use for a lot of different things, so very, very handy to know this technique. Also, another thing that I just wanted to say, my top stitching is not the top stitching that you have to do. You can design your top stitching on your own, of course. You can do any that you want, any distance, and so on and so forth. So this is not a given, this is a design feature that you are the boss of. Something else that you have to do with this pattern though is ironing the fold into the back. So this is a very, very big fold that you can see me prepare right here. And I am actually doing a complete fold, like I'm not just ironing the top, but I'm ironing the full back because I really, really like this kind of geometrical look. After I'm done with that, I put some pins in to just keep it in place, but then already continue to close the shoulder seams. So I put right sides together of front and back shoulder seam and overlock it. The shoulder seam gets ironed towards the back. And because I just like to keep life simple, I continue with my collar because I'm gonna leave sleeves and side seams open still because it's just way too much in the way at the moment. So let's continue with the collar. Pair up your inner and outer collar band and collar respectively. Find the center front notch in the collar band, as that is the point you're going to start sewing your collar band and collar together. I like to mark that point with pins to not sew any further. You'll also want to match up all of the other notches, so the center back notch and then also the shoulder notches. Backstitch that seam with the seam allowance facing towards the collar band. Once done with both inner and outer collar, we can go ahead and actually put these pieces together. They will not match up perfectly, and that is how it's supposed to be because it's going to help us actually form the collar, shape it in a way. So the outer collar is actually a tiny bit bigger in a few spots than the inner collar. I made a reel on my Instagram for specifically that topic. So if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and check out my Instagram. But basically you want to match up the edges of the collar pieces. Even though they are not going to line up perfectly, you just want to put the edges perfectly together and then match up all of the other points that are in the collar. So for example, that center front point that we matched up before as well, those also need to lay perfectly. And then also center back, the tips of the collar and stuff like that. Also, one thing that I only did after I already sewed this together, iron the lowest edge of your inner collar band up, like the seam allowance, just as you did for the cuff, for the button tape, same thing, just iron the seam allowance of your inner collar band up, the smaller one of the two, because that's just going to make things easier. And then you only want to start stitching right where the fold starts, just as you did for the other pieces that I was talking about. So you can see right here what I was talking about. Just go in to your actual stitching line when you start putting your needle into your piece. And you want to work really, really careful with this because, as I said before, the pieces do not match up, but you have to, match up specific points, and that can be quite challenging. Once you're done with that, you want to cut down your seam allowance to about 3 to 5 millimeters, depending on what type of fabric you have. And you want to also cut very, very carefully towards the stitching line, right at that small center front corner, so where collar band and collar meet, because that's going to be like a specific corner that does not want to pop out really nicely if you did not cut towards the stitching line right at that point. So if you have any like weird folding or wrinkles or anything like that right at that point, that's because you did not cut towards the stitching line. But as I said, be very, very careful. Do not cut any stitches or anything like that because talking about experience, you will need to do the whole thing again. And this is actually what I was talking about with the iron, the seam allowance of the collar band, of the inner collar band up before stitching, because I ended up doing it now because it's just making life easier with the next step, which is putting the neckline onto your piece. And again, we are using that specific technique, so we are going to pin the non-ironed side of our collar onto the wrong side of our piece. Once we turn everything over again, so we're sewing it in place now, and then once we turn it over, it's going to be folded onto the outside, the right side of your blouse. And it just makes a really, really nice finish if you top stitch it right next to that fold I really like it. You can of course do any top stitches, anything that you like. I already said that. Just be sure or make sure to, you know, be very, very neat when you pin up that seam allowance, especially in the front with that small like curve kind of thing in the collar band, because it's just not a lot of space for seam allowance. So if you have troubles, cut down your seam allowance, you know. So prepare it as best as you can before you top stitch it. I actually started top stitching in the center back and went towards the front over the collar band and then up onto the collar, because then you don't have any back tacking in the front, so no bulking. You have the back tack in your center back, which is, you know, a small little hack that I just wanted to give you guys on the way. Of course, after being done, give the collar a good press and just make it look really, really neat and tidy. This is what it's going to end up looking, and of course we're going to fold it down once worn. We are heading towards the finish line and we still have an open side seam, so that's what we're going to close now. Put right sides of front and back side seams together and overlock it. You want to iron this seam allowance towards the back, like always. And then we can continue to put the sleeves into our armholes. Our already fully prepared sleeves, that's the best feeling ever, that you already prepared it and you can just sew it in place. Match up all of the notches in your armholes, so front and back sleeve points, for example, and then also the side seam and of course the shoulder notch. You want to just sew it in place and then also overlock the seam as well. After the sleeve is sewn in place, you want to iron the seam allowance into the sleeves. That's actually always the case. So if you have sleeves in your garment, you always want to iron the seam allowance towards the sleeve. It just shapes the shoulder a tiny bit and it just makes a tiny bit of a difference. So just go ahead and do that for your sleeve seam allowances. The last thing that we need to do sewing wise is actually the hem. I just like to fold my hem up twice with 5mm and just top stitch it closely to the edge. With this hem, as it's slightly curved but mostly straight, it's really, really easy to just do that as I'm going on the sewing machine. You of course can also prepare it with pins and your iron, whatever you feel comfortable. You can also hem your shirt however you'd like, so feel free to do anything. And of course, last but not least, give it a good press so that your hem looks neat and tidy, and you can continue with sewing your buttons and your buttonholes in place. Oh yeah, and of course, continue down the fold into your hem that you just ironed straight again, so I added that back in. But anyways, now that you're done with the shirt, you can continue to put your buttons and buttonholes in place, just where they are indicated in the pattern. And as I am working on my industrial machine, I'm using this amazing buttonhole foot, which just, you know, is a mechanical device that makes buttonholes on my normal industrial machine. But anyways, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that you are happy with like this very basic kind of blouse, which I totally love, so I am very happy with how it turned out. Of course, I'm going to show you how it looks worn in just a second. If you enjoyed this video, give this video a like and also hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't already. It is actually helping me so much if you just engage with this video, so if you could do that, that would mean so much to me. Next time, we're going to see each other on Sunday, so thank you so much for watching, and until then, bye guys!